Now this is probably the first SBC I've ever used that has 3D acceleration working out of the box. That's 2D and 3D hardware acceleration, including in web browsers, out of the box. You just image it, boot up to it, start using it. No overlays, no installing third-party drivers, no config file changes, just works. That is excellent. Hey folks, how you all doing? Today we are doing something a little bit different and we're going to be looking at the ODROID-C5 because this came out recently and I've never looked at Odroid things before. Actually a little bit put off by the name. I know it's nothing really to do with Android and I actually use Android, but I don't know, it just irked me. I saw the C5 come out and I thought, well, I might as well try it. We're also going to be racing my missus because she's coming home at some point and I want to try to record this and have a play with this before she does, after she finishes work sometime in the next half hour or an hour. So we'll see how we get on. This though is bound to be interesting for a number of reasons that you'll see shortly. So let's get into it. Now, firstly, if we have a look at the computer, this is actually really, really cheap. I'm not sure if that's in US dollars or Australian dollars, but either way, it is ridiculously cheap. And they have bulk pricing on their website, which is pretty awesome. But looking at the C5, which is made out of Korea, not out of China, there are quite a few things that are different and very interesting to me. So I haven't used many Amlogic processors, but I certainly haven't used this one. They state in their benchmarks, or they show in their benchmarks, their actual real world performance, which is really cool. So they stress test it and they're even saying that the 3D GPU works, which we know isn't always the case. But comparing the C4 to the C5, you see a massive amount of differences here. In the layout and design, you can see they do support both microSD and eMMC as DDR4. They've got some interesting things as well, like this little receiver here, which is for infrared. They've got the dedicated UART connector. They've got a DC barrel jack, stereo output pins. Like, it's a little bit different, but I think through some of these methods is how they've managed to get it so bloody cheap. And if it's that cheap, and is a quad-core A55 at 2.5 gigahertz with working 3D GPU, that's in the Mali-G310, then that's actually quite impressive. So the rest of it though, HDMI, what have we got? Where is our USB 2.0? So there's no USB Type-C or USB 3. There's no PoE header. That K, so 40 GPIO pins, I'm going to assume is quite close to the standard Pi 2 header, 10100 Ethernet. But they say that it's designed to be run heatsink free, so it'll get up to about 70 degrees or just over. That's maybe what, 71 to 72 degrees, and not overheat, which is impressive. So they have a full breakdown, including 4K HDMI output, the power consumption. You can alternatively power it from a 2-pin header. Due to the constraints, there's no PCIe or USB 3.0, but it's just capable, or so it says. So I also thought it'd be worth having a look at this little CNX software comparison of the old to the new. So you can see the X5M has added quite a bit over the X4, including higher clock speed, newer GPU, very small NPU, I guess, some additional video encoding options, and that's about it though. There is some more options on this one here. So we've actually got PCIe lanes and USB 3.0, along with THC Prime as a HDR option, which is interesting. I mean, realistically, this is all you need in most cases. But it looks like this is possibly more audio and video oriented, considering it also has additional, voice and audio processing, more DRM, that sort of stuff. So very interesting. But for something so cheap, that's quite new, that doesn't need a heatsink, that claims to have 3D graphical acceleration, I thought this is absolutely worth it. So I bought one and it turned up, and we'll have a look at it. So firstly, unboxing. I can only assume it's going to be exactly like the picture. It doesn't appear to have little tear spots. It's actually in a sealed bag, which is unusual, but probably good for, well, I had to record to cough and then I forgot to start hitting record again. So I did take it out the bag, of course. Let's have a bit of a closer look here. See if we can get some focus. And there is a few interesting design decisions. So there's actually an email address on the PCB, and I haven't seen something like that before. But we can see it is much like the layout we saw. We've got our JTAG headers here, DC barrel jack, optional 2 pins for power, micro USB, which will be on the go, HDMI with 4K output, gigabit Ethernet, 4 USB ports, left and right audio pins there, 40 pin header, IR, so SoC, our, what was that as? DDR4 DRAM, and on the back, I forget what that was. Okay, so that's going to be for the RAM. So they're probably going to be two 2 gig chips for the RAM there, eMMC and TF/SD card. So very nice, very capable little design. It's adopted the same Pi form factor, but they've got a lot of holes milled in this, which I find really interesting, some odd layout. So these 4 are going to be your normal ones, but these I expect would normally be for some sort of heat sink. So I'm not too sure about that, but to me that's definitely strange. So I think we'll have to plug this in, stick some power into it and see what actually happens. Before I do though, I just wanted to let you know that this video is sponsored by PCBWay. PCBWay continues to support this channel and I continue to use their products because they are just that good. You can use the code below or the QR code on the screen if I remember to put one up to get $5 off your first order and to also support this channel. So when you get $5 off your first order, if you use the up to 10 piece 1 to 2 layer 100mm by 100mm deal here, then you can actually get your order for free. You just pay shipping, which is like $8. They also, of course, do PCB assembly. They can source the parts for you, so it's pretty much turnkey. They can help you with the designs. They do amazing 3D printing and especially sheet metal metal CNCing. I've never seen another brand that can actually cut so many different types of metal. Plus, of course, if you're a William Osman fan, they are supporting open source live, which is currently, just finished. But they do great stuff, of course. They're involved in these maker communities and these great events, and that's why I love using them. That's why I'd really appreciate it if you could click the link below, sign up for a free account just to support them, even if you want to go, or to support me even, but to support them as well because they support me and this channel. And if you do ever need some tools or small parts, go check out their store because they add new stuff every day and it's got a lot of community design things plus official products, and they are just excellent people. So thank you to PCBWay for continuing to sponsor this channel. Now going to power this up, I've just come across one small oddity, and that's that this DC barrel jack doesn't actually appear to have any voltages marked on it. So I jumped back over to the computer and I had to scroll down and have a look around. It takes 7.5 up to 15.5 with 12 volts 2 amps as recommended. So that is actually pretty good. It means it's got some good power regulation there and they give you a bit of wiggle room. You could run it off your car. It gives you a few options to run it off power delivery as well, but I do think that that should have actually been on here. Now to power it, what I'm going to do is I've got a silicon USB Type-C cable, which is the Pine 64 one I have in stock. That's 1.5 meters and it's just good for power, but I'm then connecting it to a USB Type-C trigger adapter, which has a DC barrel jack. I also have a pile of these in stock, so they're extremely handy for these circumstances. Now the little LEDs on the side here are power and then a live, and I'm assuming that this one will be triggered by the operating system. This one is of course just when there's valid power going in. I do quite like that they have a forum URL and they've got the MAC address on there. Very, very handy. So I'll plug this in and we're going to have a look at what happens, and then we'll download some of the software and flash it with the later so we can actually test out how good it really is. First boot though, always curious. Let's switch over to the HDMI input and I'm plugging it in right now. So the little power light is showing power. I'm giving it 12 volts, so it should be getting what it needs, but we're not seeing anything yet, which is very strange. If you jump back here, you can see that light is quite dull. So nothing's happening. But what we're not considering, or what I'm not considering, is that this doesn't have onboard storage. It doesn't come with anything flash. I couldn't actually even see any SPI flash. So I think this needs an SD card. We're going to have to grab one of our new HP high-speed, highly reliable cards, which I also have in stock, of course, flash with the latest image, and then try again. To get the latest image, let's have a quick look here, because again, I'm not an ODROID user. I don't know how good their documentation is, and I don't know how good their software images are. They don't have links directly to it here, which, jump to the very end, a little bit of a letdown for me on that side, but fair enough. They've got some good Cloudflare security here, which doesn't think I'm a human, so be it. My missus doesn't either usually. And we'll go to the C5 at the very top. So, documentation, that looks very similar to what we saw on the homepage, but a little bit more technical. Getting started, so install methods, supported images, so it's going to be Android, Ubuntu server, or Ubuntu with GNOME, it looks like. Let's definitely grab that GNOME desktop one. Default username and password. Smash on the Balena Etcher, or use the eMMC reader. I also have some of these, kindly made by Radshare. They're extremely handy now. If you don't know, I actually have this SBC shop because it's what I enjoy. I buy and stock these products because they're what I make videos about, because I enjoy learning about them and using them, and it's all bespoke, RISC-V embedded, that sort of stuff. But you can see I've got some great new Luckfox, Pico, and Lyra 0W that I've put on sale. Have these new SD cards that I was talking about. But I, of course, do have a whole pile of eMMC stuff. So I have modules from Radshare, and I have the micro SD adapter boards, which are very, very handy. Now, you see once you flash that, you just dump it on there with Balena Etcher. If you're on Linux, of course, you can use disks or just DD, and macOS would be much the same. Now, what I noticed is these links are HTTP links. So if you click it, most of the time, nothing will happen because Chrome doesn't actually want you to do that. But if you just paste the link in and change it to HTTPS, it will, well, not like that, a bit more like that, it will then download and work. So our download is just about finished, and then we'll give it a crack. Let's have a look. Software platform release notes. So any Ubuntu release notes here, OS images. Is that just a link to it? Yep, all right, so that's a link. That one has HTTPS though, so it's gonna work. How to use it, just standard app update, Odroid. There's no information about the 3D graphics, so I'm going to assume it just works. There's some Android 14 information here, so it's much newer than that Android 11 that you often see. Third party, nothing yet. Yocto, if you want really embedded, really low power, ooh, there's our download done, then Yocto can be the way to go, and it looks like they have some information here, including the BSP that they provide for it, which is very nice if you're into that. Application notes, I already opened all of these. So device trees, how to enable different things, the GPIOs, examples of controlling LEDs, I2C, PWM, what else we got? RFID card reader example, UART callbacks. They've got CAN support, one wire, LED blue control, CPU frequencies, video playing, display mode setting, I'll just check, and the onboard sound card. So it doesn't look like there's Vulkan, doesn't look like there's anything too crazy here. They've got some Vulkan examples, but doesn't look like we have to enable anything for it. C5, a little bit of information if you want to use PWM. Some details on setting display modes. Interesting, all right. We might need to come back to this, but I think it's just going to be for custom hardware, as it says here. We're going to be using the HDMI interface. Details on the PCB, and lastly, board support. So kernel build instructions. Yeah, so how to get started basically with the SDK, what you're going to need to do. And they kindly put it on GitHub, which is very, very handy. Now, to flash these images, I'm going to be using that Radshare microSD adapter with a Radshare microSD. Now, as far as I know, in case you're ever wondering or confused, only one set of pins is actually required. The other one is just for support for it. But you do usually need to pay attention to which way around it goes. And if you ever plug it in and it doesn't work, just swap it around. But I think these ones go that way. So I'm going to flash this, and then we'll stick it on the back of there, and we'll boot it back up and see what happens. Hold, please. Alrighty, now that is flashed, we've got our eMMC module. Just going to crunch it onto the bottom there. That should be right. And we'll put some power back in, see if anything different happens this time in 3, 2, 1. That's in, and switching to HDMI. There we go. We've actually got something this time. We've got a boot splash. Booting straight to Ubuntu, that's nice and quick. It's giving us the full graphical image too. It's not, you know how sometimes you'll boot up an embedded device and they have the boot splash, but then output text comes up over the top of it because things aren't fully integrated right. Well, that hasn't happened this time, which is actually quite impressive in my opinion. It's taking a little while to boot. I don't know how fast the eMMC module that I used is, to be honest. We do have the little heartbeat light down here flicking, which is pretty cool, but it is still on its way. So let's give it another moment, see what it's doing. It could be first boot, it could be expanding to fill the partition as well, so we'll give it another reboot afterwards and see how it performs then. Well, unfortunately, I think the heater I was running just tripped an RCD. So I'm going to have to go switch that back on, get one of my lights back on. I'll leave the heater off for now, and then we'll try that again. I was wondering why I was taking so long, but give me a tick. All right, so this is booted up, and it did take a while. It was, of course, interrupted by power, but after the logo, it just came to this, and we do not have anything else on any other TT wires. So if we just log in, whoop, I can spell, log in and just see what it's actually doing. So that's all looking well and good, but there are some HDMI errors, so that's fine. HDMI is working anyway. Let's just do systemctl, actually, let's jump to root. Systemctl isolate multi-user target. So that should kill off GDM, light DM, whatever it's running, which is going to be, if we jump back to TT1, yeah, there's nothing on there now. So that's killing off anything graphical is trying to do. It does seem to be hanging a little bit there. So then we'll try to start it again. And what I've also done, in case this is to do with the eMMC speed, because this is an older eMMC I'm using, I've also just grabbed one of those HP SD cards I was talking about that are incredibly fast and incredibly reliable, and I've dumped the image on there so we can test that too. But I'm curious what's going on here. So I just can't type today apparently. See if it does actually want to give us a GUI. There could be, oh no, there we go. So yeah, it could have been just having a hard time because it was interrupted to start with. I do want to see how fast it boots though. So we'll, ODROID. We'll reboot it shortly and see what it looks like. On a fresh boot, we're presumably now, and we can actually check this. There we go. So where was my terminal here? Background, that one. df-h, we can see it has no, it has not expanded to fill the whole eMMC. It looks like it's the original size. There's a little bit of room left, but we have a good looking graphical user interface here. I'm not noticing any particular slowness, but it's not doing a lot of animation. So let's shut this down and then do a fresh power on. Oop, I missed that one. To see how long it takes, and then we'll do the same with the SD card, just to give this thing the absolute benefit of the doubt. I don't want you thinking that this is performing slowly or that I had issues just because I'm using an old eMMC module, whereas I know these are good cards, and I know this SoC was touting the SD card speed, and so was this, this whole thing in its website. So it's off now. We'll pop this one off, and we'll put this SD card in. They should, as far as I understand, be using pretty much the same interface on the SoC, and we'll just compare their speed. So I'm going to stop recording for a moment. I'm going to let this thing boot up, and then I'm going to shut it down again. Oh, you know, I didn't even do that. Sorry. I'll do that in a minute. Let's do a fresh boot with the eMMC so you can see how fast that's going to be. There we go. So powering it on in 3, 2, 1, power. All right, so it takes under a second to get the hard kernel boot splash, which does look really nice, so we know that. Now it's actually starting to boot the operating system. Let's get a bit of an idea of how long this is taking. We're at about 20 seconds now. We're at about 40 seconds. So this is particularly slow for a SBC, where boot speed is normally well under 30 seconds, maybe not the first boot. So this is unexpected. I'm going to give it the full boot, so we've got a complete idea of how long it takes, and then let's switch over to the SD card. I do have a sneaking suspicion, but I want to be doubly sure before I criticize something for a feature that they didn't break, or for a bug that they didn't impose on it. All right, over a minute now. minute and a half. $2 now. Look, hey, at the 2 minute mark, it stopped throbbing, unlike my brain. And there we go, got a graphical user interface. So that was just under 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I am really hoping, pulling the power on that part of that was this eMMC module. They're just cheap. They're designed for things that are running and don't need disk. All right, now before I go any further, I have actually booted this up now to the eMMC module, which you've seen. I booted up to the SD card, but I've cut all of that out because my first card was faulty and it's been a whole pile of messing around. Now, eventually after booting to both of them, I benchmarked them just using the read rate in disks, and the eMMC module was giving me about 180 megasecond, whereas the SD card was only giving me 80 megasecond. So it is actually quite a good eMMC module, and the speed is very adequate. Why it's slow booting? I'm honestly not too sure, but now that we're in the environment here, it feels pretty good. So let's start testing it out a little bit. I don't know why it launched Thunderbird. I thought that was Firefox for a second. Do we have Firefox? No. Do we have Chrome? No. What? Web browser? We don't even have a web browser. Why does this not come with a web browser? Am I just missing that completely? All right, we don't have Wi-Fi either, so that's going to be a little bit hard, but I do have a network cable on the floor over here. So I found this random purple Cat 6 that I just had to have. I bought it home from the office. We'll plug that in and then we'll install Chromium so that we can do a few of our little tests. Now, just to recap so far, it's a $39 board, which is quite awesome. It's made in South Korea. It's quite capable as far as the specs go, having a quad-core A55, SDN and eMMC, 40-pin header. It's only USB 2, doesn't have USB Type-C power supply even, so there's a little bit limiting there. It's got no onboard memory. Doesn't have Wi-Fi either, or M2. And that's because this SoC has no PCIe bus. But for something that's $39, that's still very, very capable. So if you want to run embedded applications on this, or even something that doesn't need to boot often, as we saw the boot was a little bit slow, then this can, in theory, do it, because it does support 4K out, which is quite amazing. There are Android, Yocto, and Ubuntu images for it. We've got the graphical image so that we can test that out, and they say that it is fast, which I've seen from 180 megasecond read rate on the eMMC, and they're saying that the 3D and 2D hardware acceleration works, which we're also going to test out. After that, let's decide where it fits on the tier list. If you haven't seen the tier list before, this is actually something that I've been maintaining for a little while now. And as I review and test out different SBCs, whether they're an embedded SBC or a system board or a dev board, I've been slapping them in here. So you can see when I had a play with the Lyra 0W the other day, I gave it an S tier. It is really quite good. So I will be testing this out and placing it somewhere on there. Fairly, in my opinion. I think I'm going to place it based on where it fits. Like, if this costs $39, it can still be S tier. $39 and the lacking features don't make it not S tier. If you're paying $39, you shouldn't expect Wi-Fi or USB 3.0 plus. It's just what you get. But 4K is really good for $39. Let's get back to here and go sudo apt install Chromium browser and hope that there is something there. I might need to do an apt update first. I'm not sure if the repos it ships with are up to date in the slightest, but that looks like it's going to do the trick for us. We'll see if it spits out an error. No, we can see there's a Korean repo there that might be just for... It might be just be configured to use the Korean repos, and that's also good to know, because remember, we didn't get the out-of-the-box experience when we started this up. There was a pre-configured user, so they've obviously done the install, customized it, set it up, and then packaged it up as is, unlike some others that we see that do have that first-time experience. We can see here that it is also installing some MESA drivers and whatnot along with Chromium there, which is very interesting. I don't want to restart any of those. And do we have GL? Yes, all right, GLmark ES Wayland. That's looking quite good. It looks like it's using hardware drivers from what I understand there. It's getting an excellent frame rate, so that's all real promising, but it doesn't mean Chrome or whatever web browser you want to use will support that. So let's try that out too. Chromium web browser. And I think you probably know how we're going to try this by now. That was nice and fast. Maximize this one. Little bit of lag there. It is trying to do a lot. What we've forgotten to look at so far as well. So 3 minus M, got 4 gig of RAM, that's pretty decent. There's no swap there, it's only using 1.3 gig, so we do have some wiggle room. As we saw before, it is not expanding to use up all of the space as best I can, oh, that might be actually, that adds up to about 8 gig, doesn't it? So I'd assume, especially because the image was so low, that has expanded. I was wrong the first time, that's good to know. We have probably a 6.1, no, 5.15 kernel. All right, that I don't like. Yes, it's LTS, but bloody hell do I want a 6.1 kernel. And proc CPU info. So there are our 4 cores and the instructions they support, which look pretty straightforward. The GPU, considering that this has got 4K HDMI output, is where most people are going to be concerned though, especially because it does Android. So if you want to use this as a media player or a TV device of some sort, this is going to be quite important to you. We've got an ad playing very smoothly, which is nice. Hopefully I remember to blur that out. Yeah, this is working excellently. Full screen. Yeah, we've got a little bit of lag there. That could be limited video memory. It could also be limited performance of the GPU there, but once it's finished trying to resize whilst playing, it does work perfectly fine. That's excellent. So I've got to go Geekbench preview and download that to run on this. I'm very, very interested, but I think we do need to consider where this fits on the tier list and what it was designed for. So we've got this fantastically high-powered, extremely cheap board. We're going to give it some rating. Its form factor is a standard form factor with some extra holes that might be for a heatsink mount. Its CPU seems very capable, comes with 4 gig of RAM. That doesn't look like you get any options. It does support eMMC and SD, which is great. The GPU works and it's a Mali-G310. There's no Wi-Fi. There is 10100 Ethernet, and it's got GPIOs that you can make use of course. It doesn't have an RTC connector. It does have an NPU, but I couldn't see anything in the documentation about making use of that, so might not be anything there yet. I don't believe it does 4K video encoding. And of course, it doesn't have any MIPI, CSI, or DSI interfaces that we could see on here, nor did it have PoE support. That being said, it does have the IR sensor. It does have speaker ports. It does have a dedicated UART port function, and it's got separate pins, along with having a wide range of power input. So this almost feels like it's more moving from an everyday SBC to a very affordable industrial display SBC. Now, it's not using MIPI DSI, it's using HDMI, so it's still putting it in the hands of everyday users that might just have a HDMI monitor at home. So for its features and specs, especially for its price, I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5. I'm very happy with that so far. You can't expect, as I said before, you can't expect USB Type 3, USB Type C or USB 3.0 Plus for 39 bucks, nor do I think you can expect to have M.2, PCIe lanes, Wi-Fi, that sort of stuff. It is very, very understandable what they've done here, and I think they've actually done it excellently. Now, documentation, the ease of navigation was quite good. The language looked perfectly fine. Now, there were some English difficulties there, but I've obviously seen worse. There was no Mac or Linux details, though. It was only Windows. They do have their SDK on GitHub, though. So some pros and cons, and they're obviously going to lose some points for not having the HTTPS links. So that link on the main page didn't work, and there is some missing documentation in the rest of the wiki. So I don't think I showed you before, but if we have a look back over here, there is a separate section at the bottom of the documentation around here. So getting started, and I think it's OS installation guide. I was having a look before, and they've got those tabs across the top again. So I don't have it open already. So this actually could probably be improved as well. I'm visiting from Australia. That should be a rather safe country. There was one page that I ended up in, which was to download the OS images. It was just called OS images, I thought, in the menu. that didn't have the C5 there. So given that it's so new, I guess that it is having, they are still going through the process of adding all of the documentation. So for the documentation and support, I'm going to give it, say, 4 out of 5 for that, which is still quite good. Software and images, we've got Yocto, Ubuntu in 2 different flavors, I'll say, and Android, it's Android 14, so that's quite good. They also have the SDK available. They have details on how to compile the kernel and U-boot. They do support third-party, but of course this is so new, there's none yet. And this was just updated within 2 months, or within 3 months, in January, February, March, April, May. Sorry, long day. I'm going to give the software and images for this as well 5 out of 5. That is excellent, especially for a new product. Overall, it's quite good because it also worked out the box. You've got to remember this. It did boot slowly, and that's a little bit of a shame, but it booted perfectly fine, even with power loss and booted from 2 different mediums. So it is a good image, I must say. I'm quite happy with it. Next up, we have performance. So booting was slow, we know that. File access speed was very good. 2D and 3D GPU was fine. It hasn't crashed. It was easy to use. And 3D actually worked. I didn't need to make any modifications. Now, this is probably the first SBC I've ever used that has 3D acceleration working out of the box. That's 2D and 3D hardware acceleration, including in web browsers, out of the box. You just image it, boot up to it, start using it. No overlays, no installing third-party drivers, no config file changes. Just works. That is excellent. I forgot to mention before with the features and specs, the fact that it's designed to never need a heatsink or a fan is phenomenal. But on performance and reliability, yeah, 5 out of 5. Can't complain. Now, accessories and compatibility is the last thing we're going to rank it on. Power, PoE, cameras, storage, display, third-party support, hats and cases. So power, it supports 2 different input methods. It doesn't support USB Type-C, nor does it appear to suck power from the mini connection there, but it does have a standard DC barrel jack and it does have 2.54mm header pins, so that's quite good, could be better. Next up, doesn't have PoE support, doesn't even have the option for PoE, but they could do it. They've got a network interface that they could expose the pins appropriately in some space here and then power into that. So that's a little bit of a shame, but so be it. There's no camera support, which I think is a big shame because I would imagine that this SoC supports MIPI CSI. Definitely going to lose something there, and of course a lot of people are going to want camera interfaces, whether they're using it for a 3D printer like I've got or something like that. You can of course use a UVC class, video class USB device, which is UVC, but people with SBCs generally like MIPI CSI. Storage, I would say, is excellent. It's got SD card and eMMC, and you can use them both at the same time. So you could have your eMMC, which is fast as your OS image, and then you can stick a big, cheap SD card in as your bulk storage. Of course, you've got networking, but we're not counting that. The display is 4K 60 FPS output, 0 issues there. That is fantastic. Third-party accessories I haven't had a look for, but they're using standard pin spacing. It looks like pretty much a Pi 2 header, and all the other ports, including HDMI, are standard ports. They're not using any bespoke connectors. I'm not sure about that UART interface. That might be for the CAN bus, and that might be a standard thing there, but it looks much the same, and that means I would expect most of the hats work as well. Lastly, cases. You might notice that this is almost exactly a Raspberry Pi form factor. So if I grab a Raspberry Pi case here, we've got, that's backwards. Okay, so I don't think that's going to work. It might be an older Raspberry Pi form factor that I'm not familiar with, but it is a standard credit card sized SBC. So for this, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. They really could have added PoE. They really could have added MIPI CSI support. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, and the layout is a little bit strange, only a little bit. Like they've only just been bumped down into that, but unfortunately those things are pretty much all hardware. They could have even added USB Type-C as the power interface, just so people don't have to do this. It might add $1 to the production cost, or $2. I think that would probably be worth it. Even just having a variant that supports that could really be worth it. Like this could be a base model. The next model up could then have PoE support, could have MIPI CSI, and could have USB Type-C power input, like PD 3.0 plus power input. So that gives us 3 out of 5 for accessories, 4 out of 5 for the documentation and support, and 5 out of 5 for the rest of it. So if we quickly do some math, the math says that this is a 4 out of 5 star product, which means if we jump back over to the SBC tier list, that gives it a very, very good A tier. Now, it does mean that unfortunately, this thing is bound to A tier. They can't make their way up into S tier. I mean, they'd get really close. If they fixed up the documentation and added, fixed up the links to all be HTTPS and added some Linux and macOS instructions, that would probably actually bump it up into an S tier. But they could also release a C5 Plus variant with PoE, with USB Type-C power delivery, and with MIPI CSI, and that would also give it S tier. If they did both, even if it adds $10 to the product, like an extra 25%, that would be amazing. Either way, the ODROID-C5 is actually a phenomenal product. I'm genuinely impressed with this, and I'm going to go show the missus. Even though she doesn't care about SBCs, I think this is worth writing home about. Love to know your thoughts below, especially what you'd use this for. So it's quad-core A55, which is 64-bit, 2.5 gigahertz, heaps of grunt, heaps of display, but then the rest of it's just so-so, in my opinion. So that puts it in a very niche use case. I'd love to hear below what you would use it for. I, of course, want to thank PCBWay for continuing to sponsor this channel and this video. It means the world to me because I use them for my own projects, of course. Thank you to you guys for supporting me as well. All the comments that you leave actually encourage me to keep doing this stuff because I hate video editing. I love playing with these things, but I hate video editing. And then lastly, I just want to thank my patrons. There we go. If you weren't sure, I do have a Patreon account and it starts at $3 US a month or about $4 Australian a month. And you can come and join me, see some behind the scenes stuff. You can chat and ask questions. I'll give you a bit of help. And it's just a good little community, but it takes YouTube, this whole thing, out of the equation because you never know when you're going to be suddenly demonetized and the revenue you get can be quite terrible at times. So PCBWay support us. You guys support us by the engagement and making the videos actually go wild, which is great, and giving me the love that I need to keep doing this. But Patreon, if you can, if you want to, every bit is greatly appreciated. So thank you to Odroid, lastly, for making this great product. I'll see you guys in a week or 2 or 3. You never know. Take it easy.